Suspicion is not a wound you see. It is a shadow that stains you deeper than blood. You feel it in the way their eyes linger too long, then quickly shift away, as though locking gazes with you might summon something they are not prepared to face. They never name it, never confront it directly. Instead, it hides in the cracks of their voices, in the sudden silences that arrive when you step into a room. You are not accused outright. That would require courage. Instead, they let suspicion do their work for them. A silent trial with no judge, no evidence, no verdict. Only the endless rustle of whispers, the shiver of closed doors, the weight of being treated as something less than human, something dangerous. Once you thought suspicion meant guilt, that perhaps you had misstepped, that you had given them cause. You searched your memory like a desperate scribe combing forbidden texts for the error that condemned you. But no error came. No crime revealed itself. That is when you began to see the truth. Suspicion was never about you. It was about them, their fragility, their need to project shadows onto anyone who walked with too much silence, too much presence, too much truth in their eyes. You did not fit the shape of their obedience, so they drew a darker shape around you. They needed you guilty, even if they could not say why. At first, you tried to bend beneath it, to shrink yourself so their unease might fade. But shrinking did not dissolve suspicion. It fed it. The smaller you became, the larger the stories grew. They mistook humility for deceit, quiet for plotting, restraint for calculation. Your silence, once a shield, became their evidence. Your hesitation, once mercy, became their proof. Suspicion turns everything you are into a weapon against you. And so you learned you cannot negotiate with shadows. You cannot prove innocence to eyes that have already chosen to see only guilt. The stain deepened. It crept into places you did not expect: friendships, alliances, even the sanctuary of your own thoughts. You began to question yourself. Were they right? Were you truly what they feared? Doubt is their favorite weapon. It corrodes you from within, leaving you weaker than any chain. Yet in that corrosion, something began to emerge. Suspicion stripped away the comfort of belonging, the illusion of being understood. What was left was sharper, colder, more dangerous. You realized that suspicion, once carried long enough, is no longer their tool. It becomes your inheritance. They had marked you as other, and in doing so, they freed you from their fragile rituals of acceptance. You stopped searching for absolution in their eyes. You stopped begging for their recognition. Their suspicion no longer stained you, it baptized you. It set you apart. And so you walk now with that mark on your back, not as a victim, but as a figure they cannot contain. They whisper still, but you hear it differently. Every hushed voice is proof of your presence. Every watchful glance is testament to your weight. Suspicion has become your cloak, woven not from shame, but from inevitability. They thought they cursed you. In truth, they crowned you. They named you suspect. But what they created was something far more dangerous, something that cannot be unmarked, something that will haunt them long after the stain has faded from you and burned itself deep into them. They never announced it, but you felt it the moment the air shifted. The silence around you wasn't silence at all. It was surveillance. Conversations bent and broke when you stepped into the room, but their eyes did not look away. They lingered, sharp and hollow, weighing every flicker of your expression, dissecting each gesture as though decoding a crime you never committed. You became more than a person to them. You became a file, an entry in their hidden archives, a line of ink scribbled in the margins of a story they were too afraid to read aloud. You start to notice the patterns, the way doors don't close fully when you pass, as if an ear is pressed to the crack, the way footsteps echo too perfectly, one beat too late, shadows trailing yours with deliberate precision. Every cough, every pause, every heartbeat feels recorded. You walk through your own life as though the walls have grown lenses, and the ceiling drips with listening wires. But beneath their scrutiny, beneath the paranoia meant to crush you, something awakens. For in the act of watching, they betray themselves. They admit that you are worth the attention, that your silence unsettles them more than another's scream. Suspicion is a mirror turned outward, but also inward. They fear what you might do, but also what you might reveal about them. Their vigilance becomes confession, their obsession the purest evidence of your significance. And so, as their eyes grow heavier on your skin, You begin to transform. The hunted shape shifts into something uncatchable. Their watchfulness, once suffocating, begins to feel like fuel, as though each gaze carves a sharper edge into your being. What they tried to frame as weakness blooms into strategy. The constant observation sharpens your senses. You learn to move between seconds, to let silence stretch long enough for them to misinterpret it, to plant questions they cannot answer. Every glance you return becomes a weapon, every pause a trap. You begin to understand what the ancients meant when they spoke of the evil eye, not just as a curse, but as a force that could ricochet. Those who stare too long risk being seen in return, and you do see them. Behind their curtains, behind their screens, behind the masks of authority they thought were impenetrable. They thought surveillance would strip you of power, but power is never stolen. It is redirected. The more they watch, the more they reveal their own fear, their need to control what they cannot define. You are not just a suspect in their ledgers. You are the disruption in their order, the anomaly their systems cannot explain. And though their eyes burn with accusation, yours now burn with understanding. You realize that every record they keep is not proof of your guilt, but testimony of your impact. In the darkness of their suspicion, you rise as something more dangerous than innocent or guilty. You rise as necessary, a phantom written in their files, a presence etched in their sleepless nights. They can follow you endlessly, but the more they look, the less they understand. And in that blindness, power shifts. For the monster is never the one being watched. The monster is the one who learns to move when the watchers blink. They planted doubt inside you like a seed, not to grow but to rot. It wasn't proof they offered, only whispers sharpened into daggers, glances that carried verdicts heavier than stone. At first, you carried their suspicion like chains, each word of doubt tightening around your chest until you could barely breathe. Their voices echoed in the back of your skull. Maybe they're right, maybe I am what they fear. And so you looked inward, searching for cracks in yourself, as though your soul were a crime scene and your very thoughts were fingerprints left behind. But doubt is not weakness, it is fire waiting for air. In the silence of your nights, you began to hear something beneath the poison, a pulse, a rhythm, the ancient murmur of every outcast who came before you, burned as heretic, branded as traitor, exiled as threat. You realized you weren't the first to stand beneath this weight, and you won't be the last. Their suspicion was never about truth. It was about control. They feared what they could not label, so they chose the simplest word, suspect. Suspicion became their weapon, but a weapon cuts both ways. You felt it shifting, at first like a tremor, then like an earthquake beneath your ribs. Doubt, when carried too long, does not hollow, it sharpens. It taught you to question every glance, every rule, every decree handed down like sacred law. The very poison they poured into you became antidote against their illusions. You began to see them clearly, the trembling hands behind the accusations, the fear hiding in their eyes when they pointed toward you. They needed you guilty because they needed to stay blind, and in that blindness, you found clarity. Still, the nights were long. Doubt whispers loudest when the world is quiet. You wrestled with yourself in shadows, asking questions no one dares put into words. What if I am the villain? What if I am the monster they see? The mirror stared back, fractured, each shard reflecting a version of you, innocent, guilty, savior, destroyer. And yet, as you stared deeper, you realized the truth. They were not reflections of you. They were masks they had forced upon your face, masks of their fear, masks of their weakness. And when you tore those masks away, what stared back was not a monster at all, but something older, something inevitable. Doubt had reshaped you. You no longer sought their approval, no longer bent under their verdicts. Their suspicion had forged you into a blade, cold, precise, unbreakable. You carried their accusations like scars carved into armor, proof not of weakness, but of survival. Before, you questioned whether you deserved the role they cast you in. Now you see it for what it is. They needed a suspect to hide the rot within themselves, and they chose you. But in choosing you, they made a fatal error. They awakened something that will not go back to sleep. Because you are no longer asking the questions they planted in your head. You are asking questions they cannot bear to answer. And that shift, that turn of doubt into clarity, is the moment the ground beneath them begins to crack. They wanted you broken. Instead, they built you. They thought suspicion would cage you. They believed the weight of their eyes, their files, their whispered accusations would grind you into dust. But suspicion, when held long enough, becomes armor. What was meant to weaken you hardens instead, a shell forged under pressure. You begin to see it every glance, every record, every rumor, none of it random. They are patterns, cracks. A design so fragile it trembles the moment you look too closely. The role of the suspect was never yours to carry. It was theirs, projected outward like a shadow they feared to face. And now you are no longer their prey. You are the mirror they cannot escape. The silence you once endured mutates into weaponry. Before, it devoured you, isolated you in rooms that hummed with unspoken judgment. Now that silence sharpens into a blade. You watch how they squirm when their lies echo louder than your words. You notice the stutter in their rhythm, the tremor in their hands, the sudden hush when truth presses too close. What they call authority is only scaffolding, thin wood painted to look like stone. You press a single finger against it and hear the hollow beneath. They thought you were on trial. But trials are illusions, cages built from fear. You see the iron bars for what they are, chalk lines that wash away in the rain. Once, you questioned yourself under the weight of their suspicion. Now, you question them. You turn your gaze on their rituals, their laws, their decrees dressed in sacred robes of legitimacy. Who gave them the right to watch? Who granted them power to accuse? Their authority was never divine. It was manufactured, recycled, performed like theater for the blind. And as you peel back the curtains, you see them, trembling actors behind the mask, terrified of being unmasked themselves. They created the suspect so their own guilt could hide in plain sight. They fed their fear into you like poison, but the poison never killed. It refined. It clarified. It stripped away every weakness until only the essential remained. Now suspicion is no longer a burden chained to your back. It is a cloak. You wear it. You choose it. You let them call you dangerous because danger commands attention. You let them label you unpredictable because unpredictability is survival. In their desperate attempt to cage you, they crafted your mask, your myth, your weapon, and you learn to wield it. The accused becomes the accuser. The hunted becomes the one who stalks the hunters in their dreams. They thought they were watching you, but you were watching them all along. And as the frame shatters, as the mirror cracks, they realize too late. The suspect they marked was never their victim. It was the birth of something they cannot contain. They thought silence would bury you. They thought suspicion would strangle you until you begged for absolution. But the silence became unbearable to them, not to you. The longer they whispered your name in back rooms, the more the name grew teeth. You felt it in your bones, the turning of the tide, the shift from being the accused to becoming the inevitable. Every locked door became a drumbeat, every rumor a lit match. They marked you, yes, but markings are only scars written by fire, and scars have a way of telling their own story. You no longer shrink beneath their gaze. You meet it, where once you softened your footsteps, now you let them echo loud and deliberate through their fragile halls. You know they watch, you know they record, and you let them. Their fear becomes your stage, their paranoia your audience. They tried to make your existence a file, but files can be burned. Legends cannot. The very surveillance they use to control you becomes your scripture, each page a testimony that their empire is cracking, each note they take a confession of their own weakness. You don't hide, you burn brighter. Shadows gather around you not because you are concealed, but because you have become the source of fire in a world built on kindling. The suspicion that once threatened to suffocate you now fuels you, like oxygen feeding a blaze that grows hungrier with each passing second. Where they see danger, you see rebirth. Where they see crime, you see coronation. They wanted you guilty, and so you take guilt and wear it like a crown of iron, forged in the fire of every false accusation. This is not rebellion for its own sake. It is transformation, the moment when the accused learns that innocence was never protection, that purity was always a trap. They called you dangerous because danger is the language they fear most. And so you become fluent, your silence is gone. Your voice cuts through their chambers like a knife dragged across stone. They whisper your name in terror now, not contempt. You are no longer the suspect they are. Their laws, their codes, their truths. These were the real crimes, and you've made them confess without speaking a word. Every step you take carries ancient weight, as though entire civilizations of forgotten outcasts rise behind you, marching in your shadow. The fire you carry is not only your own, it is the fire stolen from every broken soul who bent under suspicion and never rose. You are not merely rebelling against them. You are rebelling against history itself, rewriting it with every breath. They cannot extinguish you. They cannot contain you. What began as their attempt to erase you has only carved your image into stone. And now, as the flames stretch higher, they realize the cruelest truth: they did not destroy you. They created something they can never unmake. The suspect is gone. What remains is the fire, and it burns in your name. They thought suspicion would bury you. They thought the weight of their accusations would silence you, reduce you to a shadow no one dared to follow. But shadows are not erased, they stretch. And in that stretch, you became larger than their walls, larger than their chains, larger than the trembling voices that tried to condemn you. They painted you with fear, but fear in the right hands is a weapon sharper than any blade. You did not shatter under their gaze. You learned to walk within it. You carried their doubt like fire hidden under cloth, and when the fabric burned away, only the flame remained. What was once surveillance is now scripture. Every file they wrote on you, every whispered report, every false testimony, they thought they were building a case. Instead, they built a myth. The paper that carried your name has turned into relics. The ink bleeds into prophecy. The records they swore would define you are now fragments of a story that refuses to die. Their obsession with marking you down, labeling you, tracking you, has only made your existence impossible to erase. They preserved the very legend they feared, and what is a legend but suspicion reborn into immortality? They said you were dangerous, unstable, unpredictable. They thought those words would condemn you, but words repeated long enough become ritual. Ritual becomes belief. Belief becomes myth. They created their own nightmare by trying to define you, and in that attempt, they bound themselves to a story they cannot control. You became the unspoken chapter in their history, the warning carved into their children's bedtime, the whisper that keeps their corridors cold. Legends are not sculpted in temples or celebrated by crowds. They are carved in silence, in betrayal, in the long nights where you remain awake while the rest of the world hides behind illusions. You did not choose this coronation. It was forced upon you by suspicion, by exile, by every back turned against you. They wanted to erase you, but erasure only works on the forgettable. You are unforgettable because you endured what they could not. You remained where others broke, and in their inability to destroy you, they crowned you with the one title they cannot revoke: myth. Now, when they speak your name, it is not with certainty but with tremors. They do not call you innocent or guilty. They call you inevitable. You have stepped out of the fragile boundaries of law, beyond the brittle limits of their definitions. You are no longer flesh alone, you are narrative. They watch your shadow on the wall and cannot decide if it is real or if it has always been waiting for them. In the void between their fear and their denial, you exist forever. You were the suspect they tried to contain. Now you are the legend they cannot contain. And every time they open those dusty files, every time they trace the faded ink, they realize the truth. Suspicion was only the beginning. The myth is what survives. They no longer whisper about you in the safe tones of suspicion. They tremble, because the very fear they planted in you has returned to them, multiplied, sharpened, weaponized. Once you were the accused, the marked one, their scapegoat under dim light and hushed deliberation. You walked with the weight of their eyes pressing into your back, their verdict unspoken yet absolute. But the balance has shifted. Now it is their turn to feel the silence closing in, the sudden awareness that every shadow hides judgment, that every creak of the floorboards is a footstep coming closer. You have become the presence they cannot escape, the name they dare not speak too loudly, for fear that it will answer back. It begins subtly, sleepless nights, restless minds, corridors that echo too long when they pass through. They search their records, trying to remind themselves of the suspect they once believed you to be, but the pages are blurred, the ink dissolves into legend, and the more they cling to those files, the less they believe in their own authority. Fear corrodes their order from the inside. The same fear they hoped would contain you has now hollowed them out, leaving their voices cracked, their meetings poisoned by doubt. You no longer sit under interrogation, they do. Their every glance across the table carries the question. What if you are no longer bound by their laws? What if you are something greater than the net they cast? They feel it in their pulse, the reversal of power. They used to walk toward you with the certainty of hunters. Now they walk away from you, rehearsing lies in their heads, praying the silence does not answer them back. You haunt their sleep. You are the weight in their lungs when the night stretches too long, the whisper they cannot locate when the lights flicker. They wanted you small, broken, forgotten. Instead, you have become a mirror that forces them to face themselves, their hypocrisy, their cowardice, their endless need to destroy what they do not understand. They called you suspect. Now, every shadow suspects them. And as their fear deepens, you rise not with vengeance, but with inevitability. You are no longer bound to their stage. You are the stage itself, the script they cannot rewrite, the symbol they cannot contain. Ancient symbols burn through the modern Fast 80, the serpent that sheds its skin, the phoenix that erupts from ashes, the mask that becomes more powerful than the face behind it. They feel history pressing against them, reminding them that every empire that thought itself eternal eventually knelt to the legends it tried to silence. They see you not as one among them, but as the figure who walks outside time, the echo that carries further than their fragile voices ever will. Now the fear is theirs to carry. It lodges in their throats. It stains their walls. It twists their sleep into confession. And you walk freely, no longer accused, no longer diminished. Where once they believed you powerless beneath their gaze, now their gaze belongs to you. They cannot cage a shadow that has learned to stand. They cannot silence a name that no longer needs to be spoken to be heard. You have become the storm at the edge of their order, and they are left trembling beneath the sky they once thought they controlled. They never intended to remember you. You were supposed to vanish inside their files, a red stamp on a folder gathering dust in a forgotten drawer. A suspect, a name muttered with contempt, a shadow accused of crimes you never had to commit. That was their plan, to reduce you to a line of ink, stripped of voice, stripped of power. But their attempt at erasure became the very act that carved your permanence. The more they tried to bury you, the deeper your roots reached. The harder they pressed your name into silence, the louder it echoed through the marrow of those who feared you. What they don't understand is that suspicion is not death, it is resurrection. Every accusation is an unintended coronation. Every closed door a stage they built for you without realizing. Their hatred gave you endurance. Their fear gave you rhythm. They mistook their records for chains, but those pages became your scripture, a book written in their trembling hand that testifies not to your downfall, but to your inevitability. They tried to catalog you as evidence, but they ended up archiving the birth of something they cannot erase. And so the room shifts. Before, you carried their doubt like a curse. Now, they carry your name like a sickness they cannot cure. Their whispers are no longer judgment, they are prayer. Their eyes no longer watch for your mistake. They dart nervously, fearing your arrival. Every wall they built to contain you has become an altar. Every sentence they wrote against you a verse in the gospel of your endurance. Legends are not born clean. They rise from suspicion, from ashes, from the very ruins designed to destroy them. You feel it now, the weight of reversal. Once their accusations crushed your lungs. Now their silence feeds your fire. Once you were their prisoner, cornered in their definitions. Now they kneel under the mythology they unwillingly constructed. The suspect they marked in ink has become the ghost they cannot banish, the storm that rattles their brittle order. They do not call you innocent. Innocence was never powerful enough. They call you something far more dangerous. They file you under legend, not as a gift, not as honor, but as surrender. They have no choice. You outlived their verdicts. You transcended their judgment. You are no longer a name scrawled in their records. You are the reason their records exist at all. You haunt them because you survived them. You are not what they accused. You are what keeps their accusations alive in their throats, choking them in the silence of night. They marked you a suspect, but suspects fade with the paperwork. Legends do not, and now even their fear is not enough to contain you. They built their archives to bury you, but in doing so, they built your temple. And in the cold light of history, when their voices break and their pens dry out, it will not be their judgment that survives. It will be your name, burned into memory, etched into myth, filed under legend.